Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we have one chapter left, chapter 29 of Island of the Blue Dolphins. And then we've got a tiny little author's note at the end of the story that we are going to read. So you should be able to see the story here with you. And I'm going to go ahead and read. Follow along, please. Oh, real quick, just a reminder, a boat has come to the island, and Karana thinks that this might be her chance to get off the island and finally go back to her people. And so she is, but then the ship left, and she was worried that she missed it. So let's see what happens. After 2 more springs had gone, on a morning of white clouds and calm seas, the ship came back. So 2 more springs, that means another 2 years. The ship, it came back. At dawn, I saw it from the headland far out on the horizon. When the sun was overhead, it lay anchored in Coral Cove. Until the sun went down, I watched from the headland while the men made camp on the shore and built a fire. Then I went to my house. All night I did not sleep, thinking of the man who once had called to me. I had thought of his voice calling for a long time. Since the night of the storm when the ship had sailed away, every day during those 2 springs and 2 summers, I had gone to the headland and watched, always at dawn and again at dusk. In the morning, I smelled smoke from their fire. I went down to the ravine and bathed in the spring and put on my otter cape and my cormorant skirt. I put on the necklace of the black stones and the black earrings. With blue clay, I made the marks of our tribe across my nose. Then I did something that made me smile at myself. I did what my older sister, Eulape, had done when she left the island of the Blue Dolphins. Below the mark of our tribe, I carefully made the sign which meant that I was still unmarried. I was no longer a girl, yet I made it anyway, using the blue clay and some white clay for the dots. I went back to the house then and built a fire and cooked food for Rantu Aru and me. I was not hungry, and he ate my food and his too. "We are going away," I said to him, "away from our island." But he only put his head to one side, as his father often had done. And when I said no more, he trotted out to a sunny place and lay down and fell asleep. Now that the white men had come back, I could not think of what I would do when I went across the sea, or make a picture in my mind of the white men and what they did there, or see my people who had been gone so long, nor, thinking of the past, of the many summers and winters and springs that had gone, could I see each of them. They were all one, a tight feeling in my breast and nothing more. The morning was full of sun. The wind smelled of the sea and the things that lived in it. I saw the men long before they saw the house on the headland, far off on the dunes to the south. There were 3 of them. That looks like a typo. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. 2 men, maybe 2 were men, and 1 who was short. 2 tall men, maybe. 2 tall men, and 1 who was short and wore a long gray robe. They left the dunes and came along the cliff, and then seeing the smoke from the fire, which I kept burning, they followed it, and at last reached my house. I crawled under the fence and stood facing them. The man in the gray robe had a string of beads around his neck, and at the end of it was an ornament of polished wood. He raised his hand, made a motion towards me, which was the shape of the ornament he wore. Then one of the 2 men who stood beside him spoke to me. His words made the strangest sounds I have ever heard. At first I wanted to laugh, but I bit my tongue. I shook my head and smiled at him. He spoke again, slowly this time, and though his words sounded the same as before and meant nothing to me, they now seemed sweet. They were the sound of a human voice. There is no sound like this in all the world. The man lifted his hand and pointed towards the cove and made a picture in the air of what could have been a ship. To this I nodded, and myself pointed to the 3 baskets I had placed by the fire, making a gesture of taking them with me to the ship. Also the cage in which I had put 2 young birds. There were many gestures before we left, though the 2 men spoke among themselves. They liked my necklace, the cape, and the cormorant skirt that shone in the sun. But when we got to the beach where their camp was, the first thing the man who spoke the most did was to tell the other men to make me a dress. I knew this was what he said because one of them stood in front of me and held up a string from my neck to my feet and across my shoulders. The dress was blue. It was made of 2 trousers, just like those the white men were wearing. The trousers were cut up into pieces, and then one of the men sat down on a rock and put them together again with white string. He had a long nose, which looked like the needle he used. He sat all afternoon on the rock, and the needle went back and forth, in and out, swishing in the sun. From time to time, he would hold up the dress and nod his head as if he were pleased. I nodded as if I were pleased too, but I was not. I wanted to wear my cormorant skirt and my otter cape, which were much more beautiful than the thing he was making. The dress reached from my throat to my feet, and I did not like it, either the color of it or the way it scratched. It was also hot, but I smiled and put my cormorant skirt away in one of the baskets to wear when I got across the sea, sometime when the men were not around. The ship stayed in Coral Cove 9 days. It had come for otter, but the otter had gone. Some must have been left, after all, who remembered the Aleuts, for on that morning there were none to be seen. I knew where they had gone. They had gone to Tall Rock, but when the men showed me the weapons they had brought to kill the otter, I shook my head and acted as though I did not understand. They pointed to my otter cape, but I still shook my head. I asked them then about the ship that had taken my people away many years before, making the signs of the ship and pointing to the east, but they did not understand. Not until I came to Mission Santa Barbara and met Father Gonzalez did I learn from him that this ship had sunk in a great storm soon after it reached his country, and that on the whole ocean thereabouts there was no other. For this reason the white men had not come back for me. On the 10th day we sailed. It was a morning of blue skies and no wind. We went straight towards the sun. For a long time I stood and looked back at the island of the Blue Dolphins. The last thing I saw of it was the high headland. I thought of Rontu lying there between the stones of many colors, and of Wanani, wherever she was, and the little red fox that would scratch in vain at my fence, and my canoe hidden in the cave, and all the happy days. Dolphins rose out of the sea and swam before the ship. They swam for many leagues in the morning through the bright water, weaving their foam patterns. The little birds were chirping in their cage, and Rontu Aru sat beside me. That's the end. So Karana got rescued. She got taken to Santa Barbara. The sad thing is that the first boat that took all of her other people, it crashed and no one survived. And that's why nobody came back from her, because nobody knew she was there. But Karana says she made it to Santa Barbara. And so one of the things that the note is going to, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and talk about this real quick. So from dawn to dusk, dawn is the word that we use to talk about sunrise, and dusk is the end of the day, nighttime. So dawn and dusk. She makes many gestures since they don't speak the same language. Gestures are movements with your hands. And then Mission Santa Barbara, right here, which you can visit. And if you go to Santa Barbara today, and Santa Barbara is only about an hour and a half, 2 hours north of here, not really that far. So you can go and visit. And it says that the ship sunk. Here's a picture of the Titanic. That ship wouldn't have been quite so big, but sinking in the water. All right, I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to the author's notes because the author based this story on a real person. So, on the island of the Blue Dolphins, these are actual shells and tools that were found. The island is a real island. You can visit it, and they found these things. The woman they rescued, they don't actually know her name because nobody could speak her language, and she didn't know English or Spanish for that matter. But here at the Mission Santa Barbara, she is buried, and you can see this little black square on the wall. That is the plaque that remembers her. Here is the cave on the island that they have done some digging, and they have found that this is where she lived. So they've actually done some archaeological exploring. And here at the Mission Santa Barbara, you can see the cormorant skirt. That is the dress made of the bird feathers. And here you can see the plaque. It's a little bit closer. They named her Juana Marie. And it says, Indian woman abandoned on the San Nicolas Island, 18 years. Found and brought to Santa Barbara. So that is the plaque that commemorates her. So nobody knew her actual name. And Scott Odell, he just kind of imagined that this is what it would be like for her. So let's go ahead and read the author's note. This is the author explaining a little bit about what's going on. The island in this book is called the Island of the Blue Dolphins. Were first settled by Indians in about 2000 BC, but it was not discovered by white men until 1602. In that year, the Spanish explorer Sebastian Vizcano set out from Mexico in search of a port where treasure galleons from the Philippines could find shelter in case of distress. Sailing north along the California coast, he sighted the island, sent a small boat ashore, and named it La Isla de la San Nicolas, in honor of the patron saint of sailors, travelers, and merchants. As the centuries passed, California changed from Spanish to Mexican hands. The Americans arrived, but only occasional hunters visited the island. Its Indian inhabitants remained in isolation. The girl Robinson Crusoe, whose story, Robinson Crusoe is another story of a man who was on an island, but this is the girl version, whose story I have attempted to recreate, actually lived alone upon this island from 1835 to 1853, and is known to history as the Lost Woman of San Nicolas. The facts about her are few. From the reports of Captain Hubbard, whose schooner carried away the Indians of Galasat, we know that the girl did jump into the sea, despite efforts to restrain her. From records left by Captain Nedever, we know that he found her 18 years later, alone with a dog in a crude house on the headland, dressed in a skirt of cormorant feathers. Father Gonzalez of Santa Barbara Mission, who befriended her after her rescue, learned that her brother had been killed by wild dogs. He learned little else, for she spoke to him only in sighs. Neither he nor the many Indians at the mission could understand her strange language. The Indians of Galasat had long since disappeared. The woman of San Nicolas, the lost woman of San Nicolas, is buried on a hill near the Santa Barbara Mission. Her skirt of green cormorant feathers was sent to Rome. Outermost of the 18 Channel Islands, San Nicolas is about 75 miles southwest of Los Angeles. For years, historians thought it had been settled some 6 centuries ago. But recent carbon-14 tests of excavations on the island show that Indians came here from the north long before the Christian era. Their images of the creatures of the land, sea, and air, similar to those found on the shores of Alaska and carved with extraordinary skill, may be seen at the Southwest Museum in Los Angeles. The future of San Nicolas is not clear. It is now a secret base of the United States Navy, but scientists predict that because of its pounding waves and furious winds, it will one day be swept back into the sea. In the writing of the Island of the Blue Dolphins, I am deeply indebted to Maud and Delos Lovelace, to Bernice Eastman Johnson of the Southwest Museum, and to Fletcher Carr, formerly curator of the San Diego Museum of Man. So there's lots there to explore if you are still interested in Karana. And in fact, Scott Odell wrote a second book. I forget exactly the name of it. It's Isa or Isla or something like that. I forget. Um, but it's kind of like a part two of this story. So if you enjoyed this, you might want to consider picking up the other one. And he wrote lots of good stories. So, all right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I know I enjoyed reading it with you and going through it. So, kind of exciting. All right, I'm going to say goodbye now. So, take care. Bye.